Good evening. I'd like to call to order the October 16th meeting of the New Canaan Board of Education. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. So to kick off our meeting, I'll ask for a motion to approve our agenda. Julie, second. Hugo, all in favor? Okay, moving on. Approval of minutes from the October 2nd meeting. Can I have a motion? Hugo? Penny, all in favor? Okay, unanimous. Moving on. Comments from the public. To ensure the public's right to be heard, the board has set aside time during the meeting for public comments. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker and a maximum of 15 minutes to each subject. I see we have someone addressing the board.
You do?
Yes.
Just have a couple, since the...
You could state your name, please.
My
Thank
name
you.
is Alan Haas. I see we have on the agenda the dome. I just want to give a couple maybe interesting historical facts about that. There was quite a tussle during the planning of the new high school in 1971 into 72. The contest was between the astronomy teacher and the director of athletics, Warren Darling and Joe Sikorsky. And as you would expect, the athletes would want to have their swimming pool, which was an option on the table from the architects. But due to the quiet, determined diligence of Mr. Warren Darling, the observatory won out. And so that's why I'm here to say that was a great decision by the board at the time, and I'm really happy that we're restoring this, or we have restored this wonderful facility. And my plaudits to the superintendent, principal, and everybody, and the board for bringing this wonderful facility back alive. Because after all, there is a world out there greater than we. The second thing I wanted to mention was there was a scramble in the summer of 1972 to get this new building finished. And there was a big scramble. Everybody pitched in, and as usual, schedules were delayed and so on. But one thing happened during the summer that was, I think, serious, in my opinion, as a citizen. The manufacturer sent the wrong size for the bookcases in the library. That phenomenal library at the time was a model for the entire region. So they had to manufacture send back new braces, what do you call them, stands for the library, and not the shelves so much. It was that the stands for the shelves were not the right size, so we couldn't put them together. So there was a scramble by the manufacturer, I think in Ohio or someplace like that, to fix the problem so we could put the library shelves up in time for the opening of school. So the principal at the time said, look, we cannot open this school, this beautiful new facility, without the library. It's the heart of the school. We just can't do it. So he talked to everybody, the superintendent, the town, the parents, and everybody came in, the teachers and the kids came in, 300 or 400 people. They got here in time over Labor Day weekend, so they all worked together to put the library together, put the books up there, so that the school could open with a library, which is the heart of the school. So congratulations to all those who got that done.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, seeing none, we'll move on. Reports and recognition. We have a full lineup tonight, and we kick it off with a facilities review. Dr. Lutzy, do you want to introduce?
Actually,
or
I'll ask
Sean?
Mr. O'Keefe if he'd like to introduce our guest from Silver Petrocelli.
I'm pleased to introduce David Stein and his colleagues Matt and Ken from Silver Petrocelli, who were asked to renew their facilities assessment. The last one was done probably 5-7 years ago. And they're here tonight to present their findings, and we look forward to hearing it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is David Stein. I am a principal project architect with Silver Petrocelli and Associates. We are a 50-person architectural engineering interior design firm. Our offices are in Hamden. We also have an office in New London. With me, as Sean mentioned, is my colleagues, Matt Miller, project architect, and Ken Eldridge, our chief mechanical engineer, who have worked on the assessment. As Sean mentioned, we worked on this assessment, and I think it does go back even a little further than 5 to 7 years, but we have obviously been in the district before and understand these buildings, and thank you for asking us to come back to sort of look at it from a different lens. We're obviously in a different world of than we were at that time, and looking at sort of the health of the buildings are important piece and a good tool for your long-range planning. So we felt the format of the report that you do have in front of you, and you have sort of two. The bound is the report, the one with the GBC binder. The other one is just following along on the PowerPoint that we do have in front of you, and we do have those copies situated over there for the public to sort of follow along. So I want to just start again with the process of how we begin to sort of parse out a project of this scale, looking at each of your facilities, is really starting and going back to the schools and just refreshing our knowledge of the scale of each of the buildings, but meeting with your facility staff. And before I even get into anything, I just really want to point out that we were really impressed with just the upkeep of the overall schools, and Matt will talk about that. There's definitely areas in which we were impressed by just how well those are maintained. But with that, just becoming familiar with your facility group and the work that they currently have planned and projects that are in session, we wanted to make sure that our report reflected those. So with that, our team visited each of the schools. We pulled the plans that we had from years past and then overlaid those to see, because there's always improvements that take place from there. We did get down to the details and met with just the hands-on staff, and then we studied those documents that were there. And really what we have in front of you is we're creating sort of a spreadsheet or a roadmap for you to look at the certain details within there, in which we've broken it down by code-related items. And some code-related items aren't necessarily mandated to be done today, but some related to life safety are items that we've noted and should be sort of prioritized on your list. Items that may be repair items or maintenance items, or just other deficiencies. And with that, we've sort of subdivided those into areas. We thought 5 categories kind of work into this within the report. We break it down by the site, we break it down by the interior, the exterior, and then the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection piece of it. And with that, this is actually, for some who may have been on the board or were familiar with our report, the spreadsheet is similar in nature to try to break that down, and we're able to sort of recategorize this to help you with your long-range planning. This is our first draft, so our intent is that we would go back and modify if there's answers or questions that come back up. So we're going to start in an order of starting with East, in which we broke it down by those items. Obviously, with each one, there's cost implications with that. But I'd like to turn it over to Matt and then Ken, and we'll kind of go school by school of walking you through our observations and such. Please interject at any time with questions. We will pause, we'll go back, we can do that. There is a lot here to go through, but I think we could walk you through, and then I'm sure there's plenty of questions that will come through that. So with that, Matt, I'll turn it over to you, and we will, start from the outside and work our way inward.
Great, thank you.
Hi, thank you for having me. As David mentioned, we were very impressed with the maintenance of your schools. I mentioned to Daniel Clark that, we visit a lot of schools, and these were in phenomenal shape. There are some items that should be addressed, but first and foremost, your kitchen and cafeteria maintenance crews are fantastic. Everything was sparkling clean, and it really shows a pride of their work that they have there at all the schools. I just want to get that out of the way. So starting with East, there's not too much here. You have done so many improvements since the 2014 survey. A lot of updated equipment on the playgrounds. There's some minor maintenance as far as parking lot cracking. There's some areas where as far as egress doors, you can see. Do you have that clicker? There are some areas where the egress doors are not at grade. We would suggest building up ramps there to help with ADA requirements. And the playgrounds do have the wood chips. Our recommendation would be to replace those with a rubber surface, poured rubber surface.
And just highlighting that on, it provides a protection in terms of fall protection. There's obviously longevity items in terms of sourcing the right product that will fit for that, but it's very common that contemporary playgrounds will have a pourable surface. They work well with water management or stormwater management design. And then there's really just a right choice that works with your overall maintenance and longevity, but it provides a safety issue and also addresses just drainage within that.
Moving on to the exterior envelope. Not too much here. There is some brick repointing. You can see there's some cracking of the grout there. Regular maintenance is suggested for that. There is the areas in one of the additions where the concrete is flat, and you can see that it lets moisture accumulate and you have a buildup of mildew. We would suggest ripping out that concrete and pouring a sloped surface there. Also, around the school, there is some minor rusting of the hollow metal frames and doors. We would suggest sanding, priming, repainting that as part of your regular maintenance.
And these are sort of common items. I know you look at the totality of them, but, the brick repairs and even the separation that you see on those joints, that's not an indication of structural failure. It's really just common movement of a building of this era. So you're at the right time to do maintenance to that, and, that can be done in phases. That could be looked at in smaller bunches. But we wanted to, at least present in totality that the exterior skin of brick has a certain life cycle, and you start seeing that wear. You just kind of take that piece by piece and repair that as you move along. And I think the district has done that on some other projects from our understanding. So we would suggest you put that in your long-range plan.
Moving on into the interior, there's a couple bathrooms that have they've had the grab bars updated, but they don't have the vertical grab bar. We suggest moving in around the school and adding those. Few areas where there's not the proper handrail extensions, being this is an elementary school, we would suggest having the dual height handrail for the smaller children. Once again, some door maintenance, as you can see from the interior. And East was probably out of all the schools, it probably had the most dire need of replacing of the ACT drop ceiling system. We would suggest at some point in the future to have a replacement of that. A lot of sagging tiles, a lot of water damage, most likely not from the roof, but possibly from condensate or other pipes going through the structure.
So as far as just the items with the grab bars, there's been some subtleties in the building code since our last report. So these are just new code items that have been brought up since the last time you did it. It's sort of a subtle item, but, I think it's something you could address. As far as the replacement of ceiling tiles throughout, I think it's also provides you with a benefit. These type of tiles are pretty much the standard style tile, and I think even what you see in this room, it provides much better acoustics by just changing the right tile. which is obviously important in each of the educational spaces just to absorb the sound. And also just the color or brightness of that tile allows for light to reflect back down on the surface, and it just improves the overall appearance in the space and makes for a better educational space. So there are certain areas where we do see that staining. It's most likely, again, a byproduct of just condensate that happens during these humid days, and those could be traced out and fixed, so you could always just replace the tile in kind. We're recommending maybe reconsidering and doing a tile replacement project across the board. I think you'll yield more than just a maintenance item. You'll improve educationally on that.
Having the insight that we had from the past studies.
Sorry, just one, we have a question.
Oh, yes,
You want to
please.
go through everything, or if you have small questions?
I think,
Building at a time.
yeah, we wanted to do per building.
Yeah,
So when we finish east, we'll pause and,
right.
yeah.
Sounds like a plan.
Go ahead.
With the insight that we had from the previous study that we did, we noticed that a lot of the things from our last study were knocked off the list, and that's, something that you should be commended on, following through and actually upgrading and maintaining. So we just wanted to note that a lot of the stuff that we're proposing here is along the same vein. The first couple of items here, four items to be sure, are just regular maintenance. These are pieces of equipment which are quickly coming to the end of their useful service life. And, they're gonna need to be replaced at some point. It's not a dire situation for the most part. Routine maintenance and upkeep can keep these going for a while longer. So in the long term, that's something you guys would like to look at and take note of. The classroom AC is the big ticket item here, and that is sort of the lowest priority, but we do know that there have been issues with potential indoor air quality. And so one of the ways that we would recommend is to eliminate the dual pump system, which means that you are hot water until a certain time throughout the winter, and then cold water, chilled water for another definite amount of time. There's no changeover, and there's no going back and forth in that scenario. So there are other systems out there that provide us with a little bit more leeway in switching the plant from hot to cold, and in addition, controlling humidity issues, which could be a problem. Going into the packaged rooftop air conditioning units, the gymnasium air handling unit, those two are basically the same. It's time for them to start looking into it, and by the time they are replaced, there will be operational efficiency upgrades that will be worked into it. And the last is, you're going to see this in just about all of them. With your hot and chilled water system, you also have glycol in that water to keep it from freezing. And so maintaining that on a regular basis is something that really needs to be done, and probably is.
So probably 169 towns are all grappling with their HVAC systems and how to upgrade, especially buildings built in this era and time. What we definitely know is that proper ventilation and air change movement is critical to the health and safety of the school. And right now, with the two-pipe system, essentially, as Ken described, what we call shoulder days, when we get from a time where it could be cold overnight but then warms up quickly, there's those gaps in time where you can't just modulate over and change and add cooling on demand or heating on demand. So you truly have a time where you shut off one and ramp up, and that's it. You only do that at a certain period of time. So having a system, and in some cases you have that, 4-pipe systems that can modulate in that way is helpful, but bringing in also dedicated outdoor air allows fresh air to come in We have systems that then can temper that, but then they can modulate between heat and cold. And it's possible that one side of the building could need heat and one side could need cooling at one time, just based on the orientation of the building. Sun is rising on one side, it's hotter on that southern side, you need cooling, but on the other side, you need heat. So with that, that's why you're seeing such a large number. It's really beginning your discussion on long-range planning of what type of system would be best to retrofit into the current building that you have. So we're not saying you have a deficiency. We're really pointing out for long-range planning what is the right system to do. If we were building a brand-new building, this would be just our base practice. So just don't want to mislead anybody that says that we're showing 3 million. You have to do that. We know that is a long-range plan to get you there, but we wanted to sort of point out that piece of what you currently have. So with that, we'll move on to the electrical, and I'll just take it from here just a little bit further to get back to the questions. With that, usually when we are switching over and adding air conditioning, there's usually electrical that goes along with that. There needs to be some upgrades, so that would have to be evaluated. But just on the surface, the electrical piece, not much there. There's some exit signs that we saw needed to be redone. Most of it was related to accessibility. There's actually a new accessible symbol as part of ADA, requires that. Those exit signs need to have that sort of dual notification on there. And then just some emergency light upgrades to make sure that you have proper coverage across the board. So nothing drastic there, items that I think could be just done on your annual basis and could be done over the summer period. And then we'll move to, if you can, switch over to, I guess, the last slide. So with that, Matt, if you want to just kind of walk through, we tried to now break this down into a fairly simple bar chart here to, show where are the real priorities, landing, and how would you potentially plan for that over an overall ranking?
Yeah, priority rank 1 would be the most dire need. At East, there isn't a priority 1. The priority 2 would be most of the HVAC that Ken was describing. Not an immediate need, but something to be thinking about for the future. Some other minor priority rank 3, under $1 million, and then way out in the distance would be the priority rank 4. You'll see a breakdown of each in the spreadsheets at the end of the report that'll show you which items we're discussing are priority 1 through 4.
Just to clarify, this is one of the only schools that shows priority rank 2 for the HVAC, because it was the one that was purported to have some issues. So maybe that's something that comes as the first long-range consideration. The rest of them are moved to a 3, as you'll see when the slides come up.
So with that, I think we'll turn it back for questions and try to field those as they come.
Sure, absolutely. Could you, when you did your assessment, did you look at the life of, you mentioned the current HVAC, and it sounds like East is the one that, I don't know if it's aged differently than the others, but what is your estimate on the life left of, the usable life left of that HVAC system in that building?
Yeah, I don't think anyone that we've seen is at a point where we're like, this is about ready to go off the cliff. I think as we've prefaced, you've maintained these all well. So I think there's definitely a long range. We're seeing you could continue to maintain these pieces of equipment. The components are able to be sourced, fairly quickly. So it is somewhat like an older car that you still can maintain and get a certain efficiency, but you're not going to get the same gallons per minute out of the older pieces of equipment. So there is longevity to this. I would say a 5-year, you're within a 3 to 5 year window of beginning to create long-range plans for how you address that.
So you mentioned my other question was around efficiency. So do you have data on improvements and cost efficiency of moving to a full building system?
So that ties into the envelope piece of it, which I don't think we've necessarily talked about.
Okay, I'm
yet.
jumping ahead. All right.
Nope, that's
Oh.
fine. No, it's actually a good point, because I think it'll sort of answer the same questions on the other part of the building. So obviously, you know the age of these buildings, and, the envelope in terms of its overall energy efficiency wouldn't be the same energy value that we would have if we were building a new one. Our energy codes have matured drastically since the 1970s, and the way that we build our schools now are super insulated. So with that, you need to make the right choice between what type of system you're putting into your building to maximize its energy efficiency. Because if the windows are not super insulated, or the roof, or the walls, or the floors are not super insulated, you're not getting the full benefit of the efficiency of the actual mechanical systems. So with that, you have to sort of make the choice of what is the right systems to fit and balance with the envelope that you currently have in place. What we can tell you is what you currently have, and if there's a move to closer towards electrification, and obviously you've done a lot with solar, which is great, you're going to be able to sort of parlay those two together and get an efficient system. I can't say what efficiency rating you're going to get. That takes a fairly sophisticated energy model to calculate those numbers. But from what you currently have to a full new electrical ventilation system, it'll be a drastic improvement to the overall efficiency of those operations.
Got it. Thank you.
You're
Other questions?
So I had one small question, two bigger ones. So just a small
Okay.
previous, in terms of fixing the leaks and fixing the condensate, the current stains that are there. Have we done that? Wouldn't that be a priority one? Just to get any of those leaks?
Yeah, the reason why we didn't include it as a priority, I think that's really already part of your maintenance plan, so I think that's there. So, but yes, that is an item that, you see a stain, you should trace it. The good news is, your roofs, and when we get to, when we get to each of the buildings, but in terms of your roofs that are fairly young, it's most likely not a byproduct of that, it's probably condensate. But yeah, so we would suggest that you trace that out, and our understanding is that does happen.
Okay, so the big questions I had are, where are we on the window system at East? And
The-
how much longevity is there? I was just trying to think of the major building systems, and really where I was going is, if you're redoing the HVAC and you have to redo the windows, you're sort of getting close to a quasi, like, renovate as new.
Renovate is due, right.
So what, not that I want to throw us into that category, but like, how good are these buildings overall? And where are we on that? Like, in terms of,
The windows at East were in fairly good shape that I could see. I didn't notice any caulking or gasket, deterioration. There are some schools we'll get into that do require that, but I didn't notice that at East.
So,
so what would be, are they the original, they're the windows from when we did we haven't done them since we did the elementary schools, right? So the elementary schools were finished, they were finished before we started the high school, and
yeah,
like, they were in the 90s.
yeah, so they're
like,
mid-90s, so.
we're getting on to, I'm giving my math, how many, like 30 years or whatever, 20 years, 25 years?
Right.
30 years for those windows? So I guess I sort of wanted an evaluation for, like, we obviously did a great job when we did that renovation in the 90s, but what are we looking at down the pike there?
So it really comes down to the cost-benefit analysis of how much more R value or thermal value are going to get to replace those windows to get how much more of a gain will you get? So there needs, to answer your question, there would need to be sort of a cost-benefit analysis to go into if you're going to do that, where are some of the other deficiencies that go along with that. We're currently in Westport right now, just evaluating their entire envelope of all of their schools, just to see, we're actually doing what they call blower door tests. We're just looking to see what the ventilation rate, where, you know, if windows or doors are leaky, could we simply just seal up any of the cracks just to make minor changes without doing a full renovation? Because then that does beg the question, well, what do you do next? You know, what about the walls? And then are you getting into sort of a renovate as new piece of it? So that is something that would have to be explored. Our study was really looking at items that we saw that would necessarily be deficient and need full replacement. Right now, everything in terms of the content and the assembly of the windows is in good condition, okay? And there are some you're gonna see that we definitely are recommending some repairs. But the question is, does that trigger a full replacement just to get a more efficient window? That would have to be explored, but in most cases, you don't get the cost benefit to just get from one R value of 8 to an
Right,
R
okay.
value of 12, for example.
So then, my last question, I'm not sure I understand. So are you recommending a full four-pipe system for east, or are you recommending some sort of a modified two-pipe system?
I think we're looking at other ways of having simultaneous heating and cooling. Four-pipe would be one of them, VRF would be another one, decoupling the ventilation would be another one. But there are ways of doing it, and again, cost-benefit analysis would play into it.
So
You
we'll,
did bring up a good point about the renovate is new part of it. It would make sense to do the envelope before the HVAC, because if you do the envelope after, you could be left with oversized equipment, which is, maybe it sounds good, but it comes with just as many intricacies as well that could lead to indoor air quality issues.
And how does that, I was just looking at the ceiling, because you actually had the air conditioning done before the ceiling, it looked like in your report. So, and that makes sense if you're gonna go mess up the ceiling to put a new HVAC. So, anyhow, that was just why I was just wondering whether or not you could wrap it, you should wrap it into a larger
it may make
concept to make if what we want is a building that's gonna be good for the next 30 years eventually, right? So just what would be the most cost-efficient path to get us there might not have been the question you were asked to answer, but would be something that, with this big a ticket item, we'd want to think about.
Absolutely, I think that ties in, that's sort of Ken's point, is as you're, you know, embarking on something that large, you want to contemplate what goes first, what may go together, what yields you that longevity that you are looking for. There's other systems that are more of a hybrid. Ken mentioned the VRF. It's basically just smaller units that we can place in areas without a lot of duct work or reworking of piping. So there are other systems that are efficient that also can be easily retrofitted within the existing building, because that's the challenge, right? There's very low profile, especially in the elementary school that we're talking here, low profile. There's only so much room from the roof deck to the ceiling to fit equipment, fit ductwork. So you're gonna have to choose the right system to fit within that envelope.
So if you did this and you brought it up to current code, how many more times a minute or an hour, I guess, would be the air being refreshed in all the classrooms? Or what's the coefficient that you look at for something like that when you're trying to evaluate the project?
Yeah, it's sized by what the latest standards are. They haven't changed a whole lot. They've kind of shifted. To be clear, I mean, there's a component of people in the room and a component of square footage of the building. When the people are left from the room, you can actually shut down that portion of the ventilation. So that's kind of something you can't do as well with some systems as you can with the decoupled and the four pipes.
So then, just on average, just to give general, like,
Yeah,
in
what's our,
terms of
we were
the
like
system that,
15 air changes, our
Yeah.
air change per minute
Like, what are
question
we
was.
looking at for when there's students in the classroom and stuff like that?
400 CFM per classroom.
which
And then
equates-
what do we have now?
You probably have more than that, seeing as it's a unit ventilator type system that really isn't easily controlled for the amount of outdoor air it takes in.
So we're already right now getting sort of an equivalent amount of fresh air as we would with the new system?
Yes.
Good.
But you're getting it ramped in a very short period of time, and then it turns off. It sort of satisfies, as opposed to it sort of modulating based on who comes in the room and exits the room and so forth. So it's more satisfying temperature than it is, our designs right now want to sense who's in the room as opposed to what the temperature is in the room. So that's a better way to modulate the ventilation rates in a space.
And unit ventilators are sort of an obsolete way of doing classroom heating, cooling, and ventilation. Nowadays, they're loud, hard to control. They're prone to a lot of mechanical issues with the intake ductwork getting stuck closed or stuck open, and not being able to know that that's the case. So there are a lot of issues with unit ventilators that they've gone by the wayside unless it's an absolute necessary to do replacement on them.
Okay. We'll kind of continue on. I'm sure there's going to be similar questions that we could circle back around on. So, great. Take it away, Matt.
All right, moving on to South School. 80,000 square feet, not a, most of the proposed upgrades would be on the mechanical as well, again. Like East, a lot of the equipment outside has been updated. We would also suggest, like East, to replace the wood chips with a solid rubber surface and add in a security fence around the lower play area. Not much there. South has some pretty, some brick that needs to be looked at. You can see some spalling there in the top left. Also, along the back of the building, some canopies were removed years ago, and they left the metal frame attached to the building. We would suggest taking that out and repointing the areas. As I mentioned, there are some schools with some window issues. South is the most egregious. We were up on the roof and noticed it's been tried. I guess they were only replaced about 6-7 years ago. There's been a couple times people have come back and tried to recaulk them. I guess there's been some air and water infiltration. You can see right there on the corner, the gasket has started to pull up. I'm not sure if these were in place or installed incorrectly, but something has happened, and in some cases, windows, the glass panes have shifted up to a 1/2 inch inside the window, allowing you to look directly into the school. Water and air can get right through there. We would suggest having the window manufacturer come out and doing a full assessment. This was only observed on the second floor clear story windows. The first floor windows look to be in great condition still. And overall, going around and with the repointing and the brick repair.
So that is an item that we said needs further in-depth evaluation. So we'd recommend, as we said, we recommend bringing, in the manufacturer, having them look at this installation, make a recommendation, and then, certain things are sort of on, within warranty potentially, but, that would just have to be explored to see what of that is, in most cases, are sort of prorated at this point, and what is the best approach to either doing a repair or replacement of just those particular items. I think you really need the guidance of the manufacturer to take sort of ownership of that and determine, at least have them give you an opinion of what they think the right fit is from there. And then, that could be evaluated as a plan. Clearly, there's gaps there that we see, so that is something that should be sort of addressed just right away as a maintenance or a temporary item of caulk or so forth. But I wouldn't recommend doing anything beyond that until you just have your, you've met with the manufacturer and have a better understanding of that.
Moving on into the interior, not too much here. Some replacement of cracked floor tiles. There's some expansion joints that should be looked at. replacing the worn carpet in the media center.
And many of these can be solved with, I know, your district shift to LVT flooring. You know, those will allow to sort of either bridge the gaps, or you could create transition pieces at those turns and corners like you see that will, you know, just better, will survive that movement that is just inherent within the building. So your choice to go to LVT is, you know, is definitely a good choice. It's a product we'd recommend. So, you know, there needs to be some repairs or just part of your long-range plan of LVT floor replacement.
A lot of the same here. We're looking at equipment that's coming close to the end of its useful service life, especially in the chiller, the packaged rooftop air conditioning units, and the gym air handling unit. As far as the rooftop ventilators go, that's a sort of an ongoing routine maintenance fee. And back to the dual temperature piping, that's the two-pipe system with the glycol. It's just routine maintenance. But up to the addressing what's in the classrooms, that was, again, similar to what we were talking about in East, only it's ramped down to a 3 as far as a priority, because things seem to be less of a concern there. And then what we had here for the South Elementary electrical improvements, it looks like there's the same thing with the exit signs, having the accessibility tacked onto them, and providing some emergency exit lighting. There is a panel issue that we had to replace a 400 amp panel with two 200 amp panels. Details not to get into, but it was just a better way of doing the distribution.
And you can see in the chart here, no priority one ranks. I'm sorry, there's a one small priority one rank, very low on the 2, and HVAC takes the bulk of the priority 3.
So when you say, so the windows, I'm assuming, are the priority 2 rank?
No, we didn't include the windows. There's no number
this-
for that right
okay.
now.
Got it.
It would require further investigation by the manufacturer.
Yeah, I think if you find that you can't repair those particular locations, that would be shifted into a priority 1, and that would need to be, you know, a full replacement of that, and then, you know, an investigation of what that's gonna take to do that replacement. So we did footnote there and just clear, I think that just needs some further investigation. We weren't presumptuous and just included a replacement. Okay, on the west?
Okay. Any questions?
Yes, any questions or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi. A question about the HVAC equipment. So the reason it's a priority 3 is because its reliability is more consistent than East. Is that correct? It's the air quality is similar between the 2 units. It's just about how okay, just wanted
Yes,
to confirm.
yeah, I think it's just really just moved in. Some of that is sort of subjective. We also wanted to give you a sense that these can sort of move between one priority and the other, and especially the longevity of the question of how long. I think you have time. You know, you have that sort of 3 to 5 year timeline that will then allow you to sort of decide which one also is sequenced in a certain way. So I think it could be, some could argue and say, we want to be conservative and make that a priority 2. We looked at this and said, it's possible that it also could be a priority 3, depending on your planning, you know, going forward. So, yeah.
So with respect to the HVAC for the elementary schools, are you telling us that that we can't stick with our current system? That we need to change, and it's just a question of setting the priority for changing? Or are you saying that this is just something that we should investigate further as to whether or not we think we should change it?
I think there are older style systems of how you control and manage the systems within the building. You know, if we were building a new building today, we would not be proposing a 2-pipe system. Actually, I'm not sure it would fully meet the intent of the full energy code and high-performance guidelines to do so. So with that, we're saying there is technology out there that it can be adapted and retrofitted in an existing building to provide you with better control, better ventilation, and
Better efficiency.
and just better efficiency, and to allow your building to be used more throughout the entire year. Because right now, with just the two-pipe system, it's either on or off. And as we saw in September, here we were in the, very hot days in the early September this year. I think having a system that could easily switch earlier in the season will provide you more flexibility. I don't know if I answered your question correctly or not. I get a sense I didn't, but.
Well, no, I guess I don't, actually, I'm not sure, because what I'm trying to figure out, I know that Westport has had issues with mold and things like that, so it's something that we always think about in New Canaan, and, we haven't had any of those issues. We've had tremendous maintenance on our buildings. So what I'm trying to find out from you, yes, I understand that this is a better system. Yes, I understand that if we went to this new system, we could control the condition in the rooms a little bit more in the shoulder seasons. We use the buildings year-round already.
Sure.
So that all is favorable, but that's not telling me, I'm all for new buildings, I'm all for upgrading, understand that's my priority, but what I need to build the case, if I'm gonna take huge expenses like this to the town to get them through, and so I need to know what it is that we need to do to service our students well, and what risks we're running by not scheduling these replacements over the next 5 to 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, I think that question would trigger a bit more in-depth life cycle cost analysis to do a comparison between what you have and what's there. Would may answer that type of question. I think we're looking at what you currently have that's aging at the end of its useful life, and
So you're saying it's gonna have to be replaced within X number of years in any event, so it's just
Yes.
a question, all right, so.
So based on that, we would say, we would move away from that two-pipe system and look at other systems that then could actually be easily adaptable to a retrofit of the building and provides the benefit of all those items that we just talked about.
So did you do an analysis that shows the remaining useful life of the HVAC systems in the elementary schools?
And we get that from from tabulated data that's been collected from the American Society of Heating, Air Conditioning, and Refrigeration Engineers, which is the industry standard for HVAC design. So we have that to go up against as far as the type of equipment and the longevity that can be expected on a bell curve sort of a way. But again, this place exhibited much better maintenance than other school districts that we've seen.
So we might be beyond,
We might be
technically
able
be
to.
beyond the remaining useful life, technically, but when you look at how well we've maintained it, we're doing fine, is that?
Yes, so there's there's parts and pieces or components that continually be maintained and replaced as you go along in a systematic way, but you're not gonna gain any more efficiency from it, and you will eventually get to a point where the equipment just is beyond its serviceability life. And I think what we're saying is you are really getting towards that. We see that sort of we see that in the near future of a 5-year point in which you really want to start making some decisions on the best way to take that building to beyond that next longevity of, like you said, 30 years. What would be the best 30-year system? And our recommendation in this report is to move away from what you have and use technology that's advanced drastically from when they were originally built to better retrofit into your existing envelope without triggering all these other renovated new components.
And
So is it, go ahead.
existing equipment that you have in place right now, if you wanted to increase the filtration capabilities of it, you wouldn't be able to do it without reducing the airflow into the spaces. They just don't have the pressure capability in their fan to get past a more robust filter.
So is it fair to say, based on your answer, that we're in the yellow zone as in proceed cautiously
Yes.
across the board, all elementary schools?
Yes, and start looking at what the long-range plan and how that will fit best educationally. And then does that trigger any other improvements? Now, a report saying we don't see anything glaring that it needs to happen immediately, but then it questions how much do we invest in that infrastructure? If we're investing $3 million, should we also invest in something else that would then balance that out in some regard? So yes, I would say you're sort of in the efficiency rating. Ken made a good point about filtration, and that's the one difference with the unit ventilators. A newer system, we are able to insert filtration or filters that could filter the air in a better way. The older systems just simply don't have the ability to do that. The more modern systems have the ability of putting in very fine-tuned filtration systems that just improve the air quality. You might have the air exchanges, but it improves the air quality.
One more question, then I'll be quiet. So if we're thinking about this on a long-range basis, and we decide we want to do the air conditioning work, can that typically be done in the course of a summer where you plan not to use the school for anything else other than doing that replacement? Or does it involve further interesting planning?
Most likely it would take over, depending on the schools, it takes either over 2 summers and you end up inserting that over phases. We're in Trumbull doing that where we're taking a particular wing. We're building most of the infrastructure, but it may not be energized and fully installed until later. So our summers are short here in Connecticut. That's a lot of work, over 80,000 square feet, for example, here at South to insert a brand-new system. So that would be a phased project that would most likely take over a year, but would have to be, planned out in a methodical way. But, to do all that work in a short period of time, I don't think is plausible.
Thanks.
Just clarification. So do we start in 3 years or do we start in 5 years? Like when do we, that's what I'm still very unclear with, like, I think that's probably what a lot of us are trying to get to. Like, do we need to start, you said in 3 to 5 years, start looking to replace these systems, but is that because it takes another 3 to 5 years to plan for it, or do we start looking now?
So I'm just designing implementation of making those right decisions sometimes are a 2-year process, just get through, especially on funding cycle and so forth.
Right, so my question is, do we start that in 3 years, or do we start that now so that we're ready to replace in 3 to 5 years?
I think at this point, you're about a 3-year period of starting your planning. So you're implemented and ready 2 years down the line within.
By the 5th year?
By the 5th year.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. We'll,
Moving on, thank you.
Move on? Yeah, great.
Moving on to West. Some site improvements, a lot of cracking of your asphalt drive parking lot. Some roof improvements. Once again, the big ticket item is the mechanical. As you can see here, severely cracked parking could use some maintenance and curb repair. And we would suggest adding a accessible route to the baseball backstop for ADA compliance.
And if anything, I think we do have it on the list, but, ADA items are items that really do fall under a priority item to get addressed. So, those are really important, or any other just life safety items, but accessibility is an important piece. It is part of our, it is part of ADA and the federal 504 guidelines. So we did notice that here at the ball field.
Once again, regular maintenance of your brick facade, repairing spalling brick, repointing as needed, repairing or patching up and priming and painting hollow metal doors and frames. good portion of the roof was replaced when the photovoltaic panels were added, but we still have some close to 30-year-old modified bitumen roof that could be replaced. You'll see in the report, you actually have vegetation growing out of some of your gutters, and that's kind of a red flag.
And that obviously will make a drastic improvement to the overall envelope when you're doing roofing. You could, solve both in terms of waterproofing, but also just energy efficiency. And, that may be one that you could tie together with a HVAC project, as, there may need to be new penetrations put through that roof, and, you may not want to go back and do those at a later time with a roof that was fairly young. So, we wanted to point that out.
Interior, we would suggest replacing the cafeteria ceiling. We've got some, a lot of sagging, not so much as staining, but severe sagging in a lot of the panels. Also in the interior, you can see the metal frame rusting, and some handrail upgrades like in the previous elementary schools.
And that's just really a result of the integrity of those tiles. They're fairly baseline tiles, so either a new grid system to be looked at, or just simply a change out to a different tile type that has just a stronger, more durable and a bit more integrity to it will, eliminate any of that sagging. Okay.
You'll see a lot of the same on this one. Again, the big ticket item went to priority 3. But you'll see that there's a new addition to the list here, and it's basically involving installing a hood over the kilns, which is really a small ticket item, but it just better collects the heat and for exhausting it. And it's not a code item for sure, but it is something that could be considered.
And similar to the exit signs, and, you saw that that's sort of a common theme throughout. We'll move on to, again, in this case, we moved that HVAC over to 3. We saw that longevity. I think just depending on how you're planning these, are these projects running concurrent to each other's? Would they be staggering over time? You can, back to the question, I think, they can be considered to be moved over to priority 2 or priority 3, more based on just how you would want to sequence that out. But
We have the roof at priority 2
Yes.
based on its life.
yes. Any questions?
Any questions on West?
If you do the HVAC units, if we decide that we wanted to do them, are there good economies of scale by doing them all at once over the course of 2 summers in all the schools? Do we have better buying power? And
I think just in the overall management, you may, related to that, there are many districts that are, especially through the recent HVAC grant process. So right now, Region 18, Old Lyme and Lyme, down on the shore, they're currently doing 3 projects simultaneously. The good thing is those 3 systems their buildings are fairly closely identical in terms of their age and configuration. So there is some consistency between that, which gets you your better buying power. What it also does is it's the same style system, so the one thing you're avoiding is having potentially one contractor bring in a totally different manufacturer, so there's consistencies between just the overall systems when you do that together. So yes, I do think that there are some efficiencies, but I think you have to sort of evaluate it at the time of when you're starting, and you could always bid it out in a separate way over time, consolidate it together. I think you could package it in a way to make your choice at that time, as opposed to doing it right now, in terms of your long-range planning.
thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, on the middle.
Moving on to Sachs Middle School. The site improvement estimate, we'll get into that. there was in the previous report, there was some discussion about expanding your parking lot. That number, most of that is for a future parking lot expansion. Also, we have more roof repair there. That's the big number for the exterior improvements, as well as the mechanical. It's a larger school, so the mechanical has gone way up. Some minor site improvements, repairing curbs, sealing cracks. You can see you could use some upgrading of the handrails. They're rusting in several areas. In the original portion of the school, some brick spalling. There's an interior courtyard that is concrete that is in well need of replacement. I'm not sure if students are allowed in there. There's tripping hazards everywhere. We would suggest ripping up the entire concrete slab and pouring new. When the windows were replaced, I'm not sure if the lintels were sanded and primed, but there are new windows in place and rusted and sometimes delaminating lintels above them. Over time, those will break down and they won't support the brick above, and you'll have some issues with your windows.
And as far as that courtyard repair, this may just be an opportunity to sort of reimagine that space. So whether you just simply replace in kind what's there, or maybe reimagine what that space could be, I think it just, will afford you an opportunity of maybe looking at that and improving that education, as an educational space. So, we put a number in there, but I think if anything, our suggestion would be to, explore the opportunities there. I'm sure there's plentiful of repurposing courtyards. We have plenty of them in the state, and some are underutilized, but some take a good opportunity of just making it a better quality space for the students.
The portion of the roof that was not replaced when the photovoltaic panels were added is nearing the end of its life. It's a ballast system, and there is some loose gravel throughout on this shady portion of the roof here. It's hard to see here, but there's a fine layer of moss growing on top. You can also see some of the rusted lintels there.
I do want to point out with the roof replacement and your HVAC projects, those are projects that will qualify for state reimbursement. Some of the items that are called either repairs or replacement, those are not eligible items. The state looks at those as part of your yearly obligation and maintenance. But a roof replacement project is what they call a non-priority project. It's one that you can apply for basically any time. It does not go on to the yearly state bonding projects for major alterations and renovate as new projects or new construction projects. So those you can, once you mature the life of that roof, or the life of that, the warranty of that roof, then you are eligible to seek reimbursement for that. So our numbers that we're showing does not contemplate your small share of reimbursement piece or your share of reimbursement, but just sort of take footnote of that. Please, take footnote of that could be taken into consideration.
On the interior, not too much. Some ceiling tile replacement here and there. The toilet facilities appear to have been updated, but as you can see here, all three urinals are in a few places are at the same height. One of those should be set lower at an ADA accessible height. And there is some structural analysis that should probably be recommended. You can see some cracks that's an exterior wall, and it's coming from the window lintel up at a diagonal.
That could be just that could just be a subtle thing where there was just sort of a minor stress crack, or it could be something else. So, that may need a structural engineer to just take a further deeper dive. It was nothing that we saw was catastrophic in any means. But, when we see that, we kind of raises our eyebrow and just says we should probably look at that a little further.
A lot of this is what you've heard before. The only additions or changes, I think, is going to be the hot water and chilled water pumps. They had been replaced in a lot of the other schools, but this one, I think it's not yet scheduled, and they should be. Of course, and then the rooftop power ventilators and gravity vents, that's just a maintenance item. As they go, they should be replaced. There's not a lot of working parts in those other than a fan and a belt, but when they fail, then it's probably time to replace the whole unit.
Oh, also, the auditorium recently updated is fantastic, and also, you could see that the chairlift that was added is an improvement too for ADA accessibility.
Yeah,
It's very nice, and the catwalks and everything.
yeah, beautiful space.
Yes, it is.
And this, the only thing different on this one is the testing and servicing the main electrical disconnect. It's not a big ticket item, but it's something that is due and should be looked into.
So the HVAC, would you put it on par with the elementary schools, or?
Yeah, we have this as actually ranked as a priority 3 here as well.
But would you rank it behind, same as?
Well, it's just a different system with its cooling tower, so it's, it's I would say it's a more sophisticated system, if that's a fair
Definitely.
way to describe it.
And bigger. I mean, it's gonna take a lot more phasing and a lot more thought to go into how this actually gets converted. A lot of these, we're thinking about sticking with the chilled water scheme and just modifying with an additional piping system that can handle the heating, because it's smaller piping. And this would be a good a case to enact that.
So this one's a little different, where we're saying, do a chiller replacement, right? As opposed to really looking at another hybrid system. So the infrastructure in place is probably better adaptable to do an improvement to what's there. And we've noted as the chiller, you're getting to the end of its useful life. Once you do, would you then replace that with a new chiller? And that's what, we're showing. So it's a little, I guess, the hesitant in answering your question. It's just it's a different system, and the scale of it and just the size of the overall building. You really need to sort of dive into the right choice. We're proposing more of a replacement and then a modification to enhance what you already have.
So are you saying that by replacing the chiller, we extend the life of the current system, perhaps?
Oh, no.
No.
I'm saying that I would probably think of a different scheme with a 4-pipe system and maybe some chilled beams and other ways of handling the cooling than the unit ventilators and the systems that are in place here.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Priority rank 1 here is that courtyard, and most of priority 2 would be the partial roof replacement.
Go ahead, Erica.
So in terms of the HVACs, would it be sensible then, in terms of replacing the HVAC equipment, that we would tackle the 3 elementary schools and come up with a plan and then put SACs after that in the planning?
They're very similar, so I think that would be a benefit, just to have, if one contractor were to do it, they'd have the same footprint to deal with for all
But
3
in-
of those.
But I think your question is in terms of would you first tackle the elementary schools, and then, once that project's done, is there enough longevity to move on to the middle school? The answer would be yes. Tackle the elementary schools first, whether you do them concurrently or do them in a phasing, and then I think from there. Now, again, this all depends on the timing, so if you start that planning now, you're gonna be there in 5 years at the end, and then I think you're gonna need to move right into, the next round, is what you see here at SACS.
I had a question, the structural analysis piece, that's just in one spot?
It's just really in one spot.
Yeah, it's outside the library,
Yeah.
Okay.
or the
And
media center.
you said no red flag, or no big red flag, meaning even if it's the most extensive, you can tell from the outside, you don't imagine it'll be a significant
Correct.
radiation. Okay. And then also I had a question about the parking lot. Did you do any sort of analysis of what size parking lot makes sense for what we need in the way of, teachers, staff, and then, some amount of visitor, parent parking? Or what was the assessment to come up with 250?
Well, we definitely could see that it's stressed in terms of just its maximum, every time we're there, you're kind of really at its capacity. So based on that, just even looking at that, we see there's opportunities to sort of reorient and expand, but we didn't do a full analysis to sort of right-size the overall parking. Knowing its proximity to the property lines and so forth, that's going to need a deeper dive of a civil engineer to sort of analyze the stormwater management, because that's really going to be a byproduct of a better plan of an overall system. But the one thing that we did see, just in terms of the condition of the parking, I think it gives you an opportunity to now also expand and then just improve on the surface material and how that's oriented. And that may then trigger you asking the question, well, what do we do with the rest of it? Does it make sense to replan? We did not do that. It wasn't really within sort of our purview per se, but we wanted to point it out because we thought it was an important piece that we did observe there. And then the question of where do you expand, I think would take a bit more of a, another analysis from a civil engineering group that could help you with that.
Right, just to be fair, right, there are so many of the projects here, and what we did in the past that worked very well for us, and I think will work well for us again, is say we use the 250, we've determined where it falls in the timeline of the work that we're doing, if it does at all, and make that decision. But then the year before we do the work, we have money set aside that does the engineering work, does the deeper study, comes up with more actual costs that may be higher or lower based upon the needs, and then that project is put in place. So these they've held up very well through the years. They've been quite accurate, although the pandemic threw us off a little bit on the boilers, those numbers,
Yes.
as I know you know. But in general, they're very good. But it's that placeholder, it's that concept, and then we bring in the engineers on each of the individual projects, the architects, wherever it's going to be, to really spec it out, scope it out, and then ultimately bid it out as we get our projects together. So.
And similarly, did you consider it for the other elementary schools from the perspective, I understand you're looking from the perspective of the surface itself, not necessarily the need, the right sizing need, but I'm just wondering if you had looked at that.
No, we didn't hear any complaints regarding circulation or space in those schools. It was Saks that had the most complaints about parking. And you could tell when we were there, even in the middle of the day, without parent pickup, the whole front of the lot was filled up with cars, and there's not much place to go.
But at the elementary schools, I think we did see that things are fairly consolidated, so you're gonna need to be creative in trying to find the room to navigate that. And it's always a tight balance too of how much is the right parking without, because then you have to deal with the stormwater management component of what do we do with all these paved areas, how do we manage the runoff of that, move that away from the building, because that's a challenge, you need to park fairly close to the building. So we didn't necessarily perceive, the right solution there. But I can say just from my visits there, it would be a challenge to expand significantly parking at those locations.
Yeah, I mean, I see the need at Saks. I've also seen a need at West. I don't know if there's an appropriate
Yeah, I think you're right.
way of,
Yeah, I think you're right at West. But it's fairly tight, the balance of that to play areas, access way to the roadway, good sight lines. Bus queuing too, becomes an evaluation of that and the balance of that and parent queue and drop off. Sort of a separate analysis of the overall site piece, but it's a good,
Yeah.
it's a
I
good
guess
point to the
My
infrastructure.
question would be, if it sounds like we would need to have the discussion around the potential cost, even if a somewhat of an estimate, in order to undertake the work of the analysis of what changes we would make. I'm wondering if that should be a part of this process for the West parking lot.
We could definitely take another just overarching view of that, and just as we've noted here at Saks, do the same for you. I think that's fine to just be consistent across the other schools, so, yeah. I think we could implement that in our final report.
I was just curious, how many spots does $250,000 buy us? Like in terms of additional capacity? Did you guys sort of hypothesize what that looks like?
It's probably about 25, it's probably about 25 spots. You know, it really depends on sort of access, but it's probably about 25, you know, the answer in terms of overall. Thinking of just square footage in my head, 25 spots, 30 spots, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Right, so we'll,
Oh.
it's a thick one, and
It's
I
a good
know
number.
where, you know, we thought we would probably take this time, and I know you probably have a long agenda, so we'll move through, and obviously we could come back anytime and, you know, answer follow-up questions. So we'll finish up with obviously the high school, so. Yeah, we'll end on a high note, there you go. Great.
Renovated is new in 2008, and it shows not much to do here, no site improvements, very little in the exterior and in the interior. Mechanical, you'll be happy with that number, and as very little in the electrical upgrade. Just some door sweep replacements, some very selective repointing. And then the doors at the concession stand at the football field, there's still a turn knob. We would suggest adding in lever handles throughout. Some cracked tiles in the kitchen, not a lot. We would suggest selective replacement of those, as well as ceiling tiles throughout. The worst case scenario, the worst area we saw, most of the casework in the school has been updated, it looks like. The media center has several areas where the laminate has started to peel back. We would suggest replacing some of those areas.
And the HVAC costs just basically entail routine maintenance, annual cost. And with the exit signs, once again, that's the only thing, and that was a new code that we first took note of today, or with this report. So it's not like you guys had a non-code compliant situation.
And then lastly, we kind of really just tried to package this through. It's just a priority, just the order of magnitude, probably just a priority 2. Those can be just built into your maintenance plan over the next 2 or 3 years or sooner. So, you know, again, it's not a life, there's nothing here really life safety driven that you would need to do in the summer of '24. So when we look at least in this case, you know, in the next year, 2 or 3, you can begin to sort of chip away at those items. And some, as you see, are fairly small and sort of superficial. When there's not much to show, we obviously dived into the minutia of that to just highlight those, but we wanted to, you know, get to that granular level. So with that sort of rounds up where we are within the report. The detail is sort of sorted behind. We are able to, you know, you see the report in front of you, then there's the detailed analysis behind. If there's any questions from that you see, we will definitely work with the administration of fine-tuning that and then publishing it as a, you know, as a final report, or coming back to the board if needed with any follow-up questions or so forth. So with that, thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to make a comment and acknowledge Dan Clark and your team, because not surprising, but always pleasing to hear just how well maintained and well cared for our schools are. So thank you to you. And I guess for the district, I just have a question maybe for Sean and also Dr. Lutzy, just in terms of next steps, given that there are some fairly significant needs we identified on the horizon. Maybe you could speak to next steps, how we want to move forward and think about these bigger projects into the budget.
Sure. Next steps, I think, are to begin to go through the report that we have in its entirety, to understand a little bit more deeply, generate any questions we might have to make sure that we have clarity around what's identified, why, and those priority levels. And then it's to look at our next 10 years and to identify what should be planned for where around those things. And doing all of that in conversation with the Resources Committee. You know, as you know, one of the charges of the Resources Committee is to keep an eye on the facilities, capital needs, restoration needs, enrollment challenges, things like that. So I think that with the help of the Resources Committee, we'll be able to put that together. And we intend, if, we'll have to move a little quickly, but intend to have that built into next year's budget process. You know, when we put the plan together, things can shift and change based on the situation and the context, but it's really to take the plan, map it out over time, and then to start to prioritize and develop the projects.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from the board?
I just have one really small one on the high school where we have to replace the terrazzo tiles in the kitchen. Since those are about, 18 years old or whatever, can we get the same color? I mean, it'd be awful to,
That's going to be tough. Usually you want to get tiles from the same lot. There's always small imperfections from batch to batch. It's possible that when you did the renovation, they had asked for attic stock. You can look into see if there's any attic stock stored away somewhere.
I like to look at it as an opportunity to just do a contrasting color and add to that. So giving a little bit of, make some lemonade out of the lemons that we have there, so.
okay.
If I could just add, so I did a roll-up of all of these projects. It's about $27 million. Of that 27, about 2/3 of it is HVAC equipment. So obviously, that's the big gorilla. So I think it would be important to get a plan together. You know, I heard everybody talking about a plan and implement. You plan in 2 years, implement in 4 or 5. I think it would be a good idea to map out over, say, a 10-year period, 10-year horizon, how we would go about replacing it, because as Katrina, you said, we're in the yellow zone and approaching the red zone. So I think it would be a good idea, just taking that HVAC part of it and breaking it out over a 10-year period as to how we would plan and implement. And I also noticed that there are a lot of things on the list that are maintenance related and should be done sooner rather than later, even if they're, not a top priority. I think your maintenance should be factored in there and done probably, over the next couple of years, rather than push it out.
Lots of updates to the 5-year capital plan. Yeah. Good, all right. Thank you, thanks for being here tonight.
You're welcome,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Okay, next on our agenda, we have a follow-on to the high school assessment report. Tonight we have Dr. Correnti and the team from grades 3 through 8 to give us an update on the academic assessments.
Some walk-on music. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Eye of the Tiger might be good. Something to get us all going. Open to ideas, suggestions. Penny, I'm thinking interior design class at the high school can help us with those tiles and designing of those tiles. So we've got it covered. Well, thank you so much for having me here this evening to present the student assessment report for K 3 through 8. We're not going to go into kindergarten. Certainly, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the district curriculum leadership team, and many of them are here this evening. Kathy Grimes, who is our K4 reading coordinator, Karen Scalzo, who's our K5 writing coordinator, Sarah Bross, who's our ELA coordinator at Saks, Jen DePonte, who is our K8 math coordinator, Melinda Meyer, our K8 science coordinator and innovation director, Mary Hanna, our social studies coordinator. And these people are the content experts who stay current on best practices and design wonderful learning opportunities for our students. They lead curriculum writing, assessment design, professional learning data teams, and assist with coaching staff instructionally. We also have several administrators present this evening, so I just want to introduce them and thank them for being here. Mr. Gussage, Dr. Fiera, Mrs. Murphy, Dr. Wallach, Mrs. Fruin, and Mr. Kasich. So thank you all for being here, and it was great because they got to hear the facility report on their schools. So really, the ultimate purpose of assessment is to support and enhance student learning. It's a multifaceted approach and should be used to really drive our instruction. Assessments should be both non-standardized and standardized. And tonight I will be presenting an overview of the standardized assessment, specifically the results of the Next Generation Science Assessment and the Smarter Balance. So by federal and state law, we are required to universally assess students yearly in English language arts and math in grades 3 through 8 and once in high school. We must also assess students in science in grades 5, 8, and once in high school. So the state testing is part of an accountability system, and it provides a snapshot of our student achievement. We know that state testing should not be the sole measure of student achievement. If curriculum is aligned to our Common Core standards and or our NGSS standards, and students are receiving high-quality instruction, which also includes formative assessment, then most of our students should do well on these assessments. So there are 3 state tests given in the spring. The Smarter Balanced Assessment, the Next Generation Science Assessment, and then, as you heard from Mr. Egan 2 weeks ago, the Connecticut SAT. We also have alternate assessments for students who are significantly disabled, and the Connecticut Alternative Assessment is for ELA and mathematics, and the Connecticut Alternative Science Assessment is used in science for students in grades 5, 8, and 11. And the students who take those assessments, it is a decision that is made at a planning and placement team meeting and part of a child's IEP. The state gives us a large window in which to complete the assessments. We usually assess after the April break, and it's about 5 sessions that our students participate in, usually 2 for English language arts, 2 for math, and 1 for science if it's a science testing year. Students in grades 3 through 5 sit for about an hour per session, while students in grades 6 through 8 can sustain their attention for a longer period of time. So sometimes we'll do a double block for our 6th through 8th graders. The Next Generation Science Assessment is a computer adaptive test, and it consists of a variety of simulations. It engages students in the 3 dimensions of science, the science and engineering practices, which is really that asking of questions and analyzing that data. It's the cross-cutting concepts, which is those patterns and the cause and effect. And then it's also the disciplinary, which is our life science, our physical science, and our earth and space science. And I think as I presented in the past, the students' results in the Next Generation Science Assessment is cumulative. So they only take it in grades 5, 8, and 11, and it's meant to be what is all that they've learned through 5th grade, what is that they've all learned through 8th grade and 11th grade. So here are the results of our 2023 NGSS assessments, where 88.7% of our students in 5th grade met or exceeded the goal, and 83.2 met or exceeded the goal in 8th grade. And so as you can see, our data is starting to return a little bit to those pre-COVID numbers. These are the results by level. The top bar is showing our 5th graders, and the bottom bar is showing our 8th graders. The blue represents the students who are exceeding the goal. The green is representing the students who met the goal. The yellow are the students who are approaching the goal, and then the red are the students who are not approaching. As we look at our NGSS results, we also look at it through gender. So you will see that in both fifth and eighth grade, our females outperformed our males slightly. We really can't say that we've seen a pattern with this kind of data or that we've seen district assessments. And when you're talking about, 5 percentage points or 4 percentage points, it could just be 1 or 2 students. So we really don't consider that statistically significant, but obviously it's something that we always continue to monitor and watch. So we do like to take a look at our results and comparing it to our like communities. And as we look at our fifth grade results, 88.7% of those students performed at or above the goal, and that is first in the DIRG and first in the state. And then in eighth grade, 83.2%, and that's third in the DIRG and third in the state. So as you remember when I spoke last year about that eighth grade, that's the grade level that never took it as fifth graders. And that's some of the decisions that we made with those eighth graders in making some changes as our students went out in COVID, and we made some shifts in what we were doing, knowing that they were going to have some of those standards and concepts taught again in high school. But we're still pleased with how they did. The Smarter Balanced Assessment, it's a computer adaptive test, and it contains a variety of item types such as multiple choice and open-ended responses. In addition to the computer adaptive test, the students take a performance task in math, and the performance task is designed to provide students with an opportunity to demonstrate their ability to apply their knowledge and higher order thinking skills to explore and analyze a complex real-world situation. And usually that performance task will take them 1 period to complete. So when we look at the areas of knowledge and skills measured, there are 4 areas of knowledge and skills measured in English language arts. In reading, students show they can read and understand a variety of complex grade-appropriate informational and literary texts. In writing, students must use evidence to support their ideas in written responses, and they must produce effective writing for a range of purposes. In listening, students interpret and use information delivered orally to determine main ideas, summarize, or analyze. And in research, students are asked to take a look at a topic and use the findings to take a position. There are also 4 areas of knowledge and skill in math as well. In concepts and procedures, students will explain and use mathematics to solve problems. They must complete problems quickly and accurately. In problem solving, students need to understand how math concepts link together. And in modeling and data analysis, students apply their mathematical knowledge to solve those real-world problems. And they always need to be able to communicate their mathematical reasoning. So similar to the NGS assessment, we have 4 achievement levels, and 4 being the highest. Students also receive an overall vertical scaled score in both ELA and in math, and those vertical scaled scores are used to track the growth from year to year. So students receive feedback on how they're performing in each of the areas in ELA and math. And certainly the feedback is very limiting when you're looking at an individual's results. However, we do get a bigger picture of how a school performs or a grade level performs or a class performs. And for example, in reading, that would be our claim, and within that claim, we have an idea of how kids performed in targets. I can't go back and say this is specifically how Jill performed in those targets, but I can look at it and I can say Jill's class performed well in a variety of targets. And those targets might be key details, central ideas, text structures, language use. And each of the areas of reading and each of the areas of math, those are considered the claims. And then there's a series of targets that are under each of those claims. So we tend to look at how our students performed on those targets, and we tend to look across buildings, and then we'll look at particular grade levels and look at teachers, and it allows us to make some decisions about, do we need to go back and look at some of our units and study and have some understanding of what that might be happening with language usage or text structures. We tend not to do this 1 year, you tend to look at the patterns over time. So when we're analyzing our data in English language arts, we'll start with the big picture. 83.3% of our 3rd through 8th graders met or exceeded the achievement level of a 3 or 4. Next, we dive into the grade levels, and it's difficult to compare year over year because they're not a matched cohort. 3rd grade did take a dip this year, but you will see from the data that I present with the DIRG and certainly in the state, it appears to be something that happened with all 3rd graders. And that was the grade that was in kindergarten during COVID. So they're the group of kids that went out during COVID and had kind of a disrupted primary grade experience. So we weren't surprised with those results. We had been working really closely with those 3rd graders on the skills that are necessary to learn to read and to do all that they have to do. And then 6th grade always seems to take a dip across the state and across the DIRG, and that's because those standards shift when we go to the 6-12 standards. We also look at our results by level. Once again, the blue is the kids exceeding, the green are the children that have met, the yellow are the students who are approaching, and the red is the students that have not met. And it's important to note that the amount of 4th and 5th graders who exceeded the goal. So we're pretty proud that 70.6% of our 4th graders exceeded that goal in the area of reading. That's pretty remarkable, and certainly 60% of our 6th graders. And then we dive into this data very carefully by school, class, and individuals, and we're always triangulating the data and having conversations about students' growth over time. We also take a look at it by gender, and this year we did have a statistical significance in 6th grade, where 85.4% of the females met or exceeded that goal, and 72.5% of the males. So when you dive in a little bit deeper into those numbers, we do have a high percentage of students that are identified as high needs who happen to be boys, and so sometimes that does impact those numbers. The state defines high needs as students who are identified as special education, English language learners, students who are receiving free or reduced lunch, or students who are homeless, and that's how the state defines it. But this is obviously something that we continue to monitor at data teams, and we certainly have conversations with our 7th grade teachers, and it's an ongoing conversation and work that we do with our 6th graders. We do compare our data to our like communities, and New Canaan continues to be at the top of the DIRG and the state when you're looking at the overall results for our English language arts, with 83%. Very good. We also compare our data by grade level, and even though we took a dip in 3rd grade, we're still at the top of the DIRG. So you can see that the DIRG represents all those students in that 3rd grade that really took a dip in the data, but we still remained at the top of the DIRG. That's not to say that we don't have action plans for kids who are currently sitting in 4th grade and really spending some time looking at that data and trying to figure out what we can do to help all of those students to continue to grow and to meet all of their needs. Did I jump ahead? Oh, I meant the 3rd grade data. I think I jumped my screen here. I'm sorry about that. But this is the 3rd grade data that I just spoke about, where the 3rd graders still are high above at the top of the DIRG. We also follow a similar process in math, where 82.9% of our 3rd through 8th graders met or exceeded the achievement level. We did not see as much of a dip with the 3rd grade, but we'll continue to closely monitor them as they move into 4th grade. And then we also continue to work closely with those 7th grade teachers with that 6th grade cohort that's moving forward as well. making sure that they're continuing to make the growth that they need. We sort the data by level, and we're really pleased to see the high percentage of students exceeding the achievement level, with 60% in third grade, 66% in fourth grade, and 61% in eighth grade. So that's a nice accomplishment of our students who are performing and exceeding the benchmark. We also do a gender comparison. We compare the data by gender, where the males slightly outperform the females, but nothing statistically significant. And then you do see that little dip in sixth grade as well, which is that cohort of kids that we talked about. We compare our data to like communities, and we continue to be at the top of the DIRG and the state, with 82.9% of our students meeting or exceeding the achievement levels. Like I said earlier, we are continuing to work very closely with teachers who are really working with that group of sixth graders as they move into seventh grade to make sure that they continue to grow, using our data teams and our district assessments to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all those kids. So I think what's really important is really to talk a little bit about the growth targets. And we just wanted to mention that we have the growth targets really takes the levels, and what they do is they divide those levels in half, where you'll see the vertical score places you in a category. So for example, a student could be a level 3 where they've met the benchmark on the assessment, but they might be considered a low level 5, or they might be considered just as a 6. So when we're diving in and looking at individual scores, it's important for us to really hone in as to where did they fall in that range of a level 3. So just because 80% of them are meeting, are they going to be able to continue to grow? And that's how we start to kind of look at the individuals of the students. The scaled vertical score range is at the top of the box, and the target growth is at the bottom of each of those boxes. And every child is required to grow, even if you're a high level 8. And then here's the growth chart for English language arts. Once again, divided into those 8 categories, identifying the low levels and the high levels for each of those categories with our vertical scaled score and the growth targets. So we do spend a lot of time looking at the individual growth of students, and we take that opportunity to determine whether they've met their growth or whether they have not met their growth. And it really is very interesting as you dive into this data, because it just helps to paint a better picture of a child's just not sitting at a level 3 or they're sitting at a level 4. It's really talking about, are they able to grow over time? And so we had a year of growth data last year, and then obviously we have a year of growth data from this past year. So certainly as part of the Next Generation Accountability Report, the state is looking for all students to grow regardless of their level. So if you look at student A had a scaled score of 2,552 as a 7th grader, which put them at a level 3, or on the growth chart, a low level 5. As an 8th grader, they had a scaled score of 2,580. They grew 28 points, but they were supposed to grow 40 points. So they didn't meet their growth flag because they didn't grow the full 40 points, but 70% of their growth target was achieved. You then look at student B, and you have student B who was at 2,601 as their vertical scaled score, which put them at a level 6. And then as they took it as an 8th grader, it was 2,686. They grew 85 points. They were only supposed to grow 40. So they definitely met their growth target, and they received 110% of their growth target was achieved. It doesn't go higher than 110. You look at student C, and this student, it was at a 2,694 in 7th grade. They were at a level 8. And then as an 8th grader, they were at 2,704, also a level 8. They grew 10 out of the 12 points that they were supposed to grow. They did meet their growth target, and that's because if you look at the top, they had to be maintaining that 2,704 or higher, which they did in their vertical scaled score. So they received their growth target, and 83% of their target was achieved. And then you look at students D, which was at a 2,617, and then as a 7th grader, and 2,610 as an 8th grader. So they were at a high level 6, which is in the 3, but they dipped to a low level 5. So this is a student who'd still be reported as meeting or exceeding their goal, but this would also be concerning to us because they didn't grow, they didn't meet their growth target, and they didn't achieve the target that they were supposed to achieve. So these are the things that we look at when we're having our data team meetings at each of the schools, and we're really diving deeply into this growth at the individual level. And it's really these curriculum leaders who are sitting to the right of me who do this hard work. They spend that time creating those Excel spreadsheets, pulling data. They look at where the kids were last year, what classes they were in last year. They roll them over into their current classes. They meet with teachers. They talk with teachers. They have ongoing conversations about the students that are sitting in front of them, and they talk about how they can help those students to grow and to continue to meet those standards. We also use a variety of ongoing assessments throughout the year. Remember the Smarter Balanced and the Next Generation Science Assessment. It's just a snapshot. We're constantly triangulating our data with our district assessments, our formative assessments, our unit assessments, benchmarks, midterms. You'll also see here NWEA is one of a standardized assessments that we do give to our students in grades 3 through 8. And it does give us a vertical scaled score, and it gives us a nice predictor of how you would expect them to achieve in that smarter balance. What's interesting about the NWEA, it really aligns itself with the Common Core standards, and you're actually really going back into that and actually seeing a learning continuum and an action plan of some of the standards that might be strengths or weaknesses for kids. So it just helps us to compare our achievement growth. So I know that you've seen this before when Melinda presented with our Next Generation Science standards, but it's a wonderful Venn diagram that we've been looking at because as we continue to work with teachers, particularly elementary teachers who have their students all day long, we find that this Venn diagram really demonstrates how the math practice standards and the science practice standards and the college and career skills in ELA overlap. And so that they don't find themselves just teaching in isolation. It's how do you blend all of these standards together so that kids are seeing connections from one content area to the next. And this is also very helpful as you move into middle school where you are very content driven, and it's allowing them to also see that I'm the reading teacher and I do teach informational text, but I'm also the science teacher. I have to own informational text as well. I have to work with the students on how do you interpret and do a close read of an informational text in science. What's the important information? How do I pull that important information out? So as we were going through this Venn diagram, we took the Venn diagram a step further because we didn't want to forget social studies. And so we did add our inquiry arc, and we're still working through that. We haven't come up with our visual yet, but it's an important part of what we're looking at when we're working with our students. So really, when we talk about next steps, we certainly review our data by grade level, class, and individuals. We review the data by the targets in ELA, math, and science. We continue to progress monitor students through benchmarks and district assessments. We conduct data teams to review results on varied assessments. We create individual plans through response to intervention, and we provide ongoing professional learning for our teachers. And we're now at a place where we're really differentiating our professional learning as new teachers are hired and come on board. We have to differentiate what they need in order to move forward as a third grade teacher versus a veteran teacher and where they are. So I am here, along with my friends over here, to answer any questions that you might have.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you for taking us through that. Any questions? Julie?
Does this take into account, does this data take into account general ed, special ed combination?
So I didn't report out the general ed and special ed data
This is
specifically.
combined.
This is all just all of our students together. I could report out how our students in special ed did versus how our students in general ed did. We have that
was just
data.
curious to
But this is the results of all of our students. So whether they're 504, special ed, or general ed, it's all of them together. So the only kids that are not included here are students who took an alternate assessment,
Okay.
or perhaps students who, for some reason, didn't take the assessment. Maybe they had a medical illness and they weren't able to take the assessment.
Okay. Can I just rifle through my questions? Okay. On the page that says NGGS by level, it looks like the exceeded really dropped off. It went from 50.34% to 29.93%. What do you think accounts for that?
So this is actually data on 8th graders that never took it in 5th
Because of COVID?
because of COVID. So it's hard for us to compare where those kids would have been as 5th graders. So there were some shifts in the instruction that occurred between 5th and 8th grade, and this 8th grade class that was the first time they took the assessment. So we don't really have any comparison to how they were as 5th graders.
Okay.
But we're going to continue to watch them as they move into the high school.
And then on the next page, I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. Does this mean in grade 8, 15% of the females and 20% of the males are not meeting the benchmark?
Yes, so that's basically, I mean, I'm interpreting it that when they take the number of the students who have achieved met or exceeded, they then report it out by how many have met that are female and how many that are met by male, but it's not specifically saying that, 20%, I guess it is, it's the 20% that's saying they're not.
It's the percentage of the whole,
Right.
not the percentage of the population.
Of the whole,
So it's looking at the percentage, I'm sorry, it's the opposite of what I just said, it's the percentage of the female population. So if you have 158 females, the percentage you're looking at is the percent of students who met the goal of the 158 females
okay,
in that class.
okay. How do those numbers look to you? Do you think those are good numbers? Do you think, what's your assessment of those numbers?
Well, I don't think there's a statistical significance difference between the males and the females. I think when I look at grade 5, it's 4 points that you could be talking one child. And even when you're looking at the 85 to 80, it could be 1 or 2 kids that is making the difference in those results. We don't have any other data that would say that our females are outperforming our males in science. We look at data teams and we don't have any evidence of it, but once again, it could be just 1 or 2 kids that are making that difference.
Okay. The ELA year-to-year comparison by grade meets or exceeds achievement level. So 2023, those were the kids that were in kindergarten during COVID. So next year, well, I have a few questions about this one. Next year, do you see that number being back to par since the 24 class will be kids that had a somewhat normal year in kindergarten, hopefully?
We would like to hope so. I mean, right now, we use our district benchmarks to track our students and how they're performing. And we're using, certainly the Dibbles, the Haggerty, and other unit assessments to see if they're making the growth that they need to make. We look at that data very carefully, and our hope is that they will be where they need to be.
So I worry a lot about the kids that were in kindergarten and even first, even though their number doesn't seem to be as low last year. As these 2023, third graders progress in school, do you foresee them always being lower because they missed those important years?
So our job is to close the gaps.
Okay.
And so we work really hard with our teachers to identify what the gaps are and close the gaps. We also go back and we look at the number of students who might be identified in the grade level for special education as well, to make sure that we're closing those gaps for those students. So we have lots of action plans in place for our current fourth graders, and we're hoping that they're going to make the growth that they need to make. So the teachers are aware of who those fourth graders are that are sitting in their classrooms. They've been prepared for the differentiation that needs to occur in their classrooms. We are really utilizing our reading specialists and math specialists to assist the teachers and really coach the teachers on how to differentiate. How do you pull a small group of instruction? How do you do your target lesson? How do you do formative assessment to make sure that they're growing?
Okay. The gender comparison for ELA, sixth grade, that seems to be a huge difference between males and females.
It is. And that is the grade level that, when we dive into it, does have boys that have been identified as high needs. So that was that category.
Okay. Hold on, bear with me.
And you'll see that dip in math as well. It's just not as significant.
Okay. What other assessments are done in elementary school for kids?
So we do, starting in the primary grades, we have Haggerty, which is our phonemic awareness. We have DIBBLES, which is our phonics assessment. We have NWEA that we utilize. We have unit assessments that we do. We have benchmark assessments that we do. So we have a wide variety of assessments that we're constantly doing on our students and coming together at least 3 times a year to do data teams, but oftentimes they happen more often because of unit assessments. So you're coming together and having conversations.
Okay. And do parents ever receive results of these assessments?
They do at parent-teacher conferences. That's a big part of what the teachers do, to sit down and have conversations with the parents about how the students are performing on these assessments. And then certainly, you know, it's part of where they are with their March benchmarks and their spring benchmarks. Oftentimes at the elementary level, it's not unusual to have the teacher meeting with the parents as well in March when those report cards come out. Certainly if they have any concerns about how their child's performing, then they obviously call those parents and have conversations with them as well.
Okay. And can parents actually see the results of something, say the DIBBLE? Can they actually see those results, or are they just discussed in?
We do have reports. They tend to, you know, we don't print them all out and send them all home because they're not parent-friendly reports. They're used by teachers, but certainly the teachers would be able to identify the areas. So the different subtests that we take in the DIBBLES, and then how the students perform on each of those subtests, and then there's cut scores. So the teachers should be able to share all of those cut scores with parents.
Okay. And if a parent does want to see the results, can they? Can they request them, and are they easy to get?
So the teachers would have to print them out as individual results, and they could come in and take a look at it. I would always say that that's not something that we would want to send home without sitting with a parent and having a conversation about it, because they're just not user-friendly, and you would want to understand what's the subtest that they're giving to the student, so that they have a clear understanding of what that subtest is asking, and then they would want to see what those cut scores are.
Okay. Do you think it would be beneficial to have a workshop for parents to explain the assessments? Because I think a lot of parents are kind of in the dark about what assessments are given, and can we see the results, and what do results mean? Is that something you think would be doable, beneficial?
Sure. We've done reading presentations in the past where we've talked about this, and we can certainly do another one for parents. And it was well attended when we did it, but it was via Zoom. So to perhaps have parents in person where they can actually take a look at some of the things that we administer to students, we're happy to do that.
Okay. I think that would be really helpful. I think, especially in the post-COVID world, I think a lot of parents really want to know, is their child up to speed? Are they hitting their benchmarks? And I totally get that if you just send it out, it might be, you know, a different language to parents, but a workshop may kind of help.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions?
You mentioned that there's a jump in standards and expectations from 5th grade to 6th grade. And I was wondering what we can do more in 5th grade so that that is not as great of a leap when they get to 6th grade.
So I think what we are doing is we need to teach the standards that are grade appropriate. And so our responsibility is to teach those 5th grade standards and make sure that the 5th grade standards are completely shored up before they move into 6th grade. And so some of the standards in 6th grade might just be a little bit more abstract, and they're just trying to figure out how to answer those questions. You know, I'm looking over to try to think of specific examples. Of course, I can't think of any right now. But I think what's important is when you're giving the assessments, even the state says that all students must be assessed in the grade level for what they're currently in. So we would never want to just jump and start teaching 6th grade standards. We want to make sure that our students are completely firmed up with the 5th grade standards, because it really does address a lot of those final skills that kids need to learn before they move to 6th grade. You also need to remember that 6th grade generally is a transition year. So you go from 5th grade, where even though our 5th grade sits in the middle school, it still is a transition year, where they're moving over and they're now having a teacher for a foreign language. They're having a science teacher, a social studies teacher, a math teacher, an English teacher. So it does shift for them. So it's not unusual to see that dip across the DIRG in 6th grade.
Okay. I was also wondering the growth targets. So I think we hadn't had growth targets for at least a year because we weren't able to do testing, and now we have 2 years. Do we use 2 years of growth targets, or is it really just the previous year?
So you measure the growth over time. So you're always looking to see if the student is continued to increase in their scaled score. We tend to focus on that year, but certainly we have data as I look at their extensive spreadsheets. You could go back and say, this child didn't make growth from 4th to 5th grade, and they made minimal growth from 5th to 6th, what's going on? Mm-hmm. But usually we've already identified those kids and we're already got action plans in for those kids. Mm-hmm. It's very rare that you haven't identified them, that they've slipped through the crack, didn't make a growth from 4th to 5th, didn't make growth from 5th to 6th, and now you're sitting there saying, yikes, what do we do? So that's why we do have extensive spreadsheets where we're constantly looking at that data.
And then I was also wondering the NWEA. So do we take that before the SBAC?
We do.
You said
we're actually just completed it at SACS, I believe, or we're in the process of completing it at SACS right now. So they do it in ELA and math at SACS in the fall. And then our 3rd and 4th grade, they take it in the area of math, and in 3rd and reading in the fall. And then in 3rd grade, they don't take it until the winter. So we just kind of push it off a little bit because they're still really young, and they too have just kind of shifted those standards into 3rd grade.
And is its purpose primarily for us internally in terms of knowing how students are doing, as opposed to the SBAC, which is externally driven? I mean, we want it to know how we're doing, but it's state driven. Is the NWEA required, or is it more, this is one of our many tools?
No, the NWEA is a district assessment that we have chosen to use. What's nice about the NWEA, if we give it to the students in the fall every year, it gives us growth targets. So how did they perform in the fall of 4th grade versus the fall of 5th versus the fall of 6th? So it's another way for us to track the growth over time. What's nice about the NWEA, it is completely aligned with those Common Core standards. And when you go to look into a student's individual report, it gives you a learning continuum, and it tells you what are the standards that this child should know and be able to do, and what's the growth plan that you might want to do for that. The difference with NWEA and the Smarter Balance is that NWEA will actually test them out of grade level. So it actually finds that happy place for them. And so you'll often have the kids report ooh, I noticed the tests got really hard, and then I noticed the tests got easy again. And so it's trying to find that right place for them, and then that's where get reported. So that data is often helpful too, as we're looking at some of those high achievers and what we can do to support them in their growth, moving from grade level to grade level.
Great, thanks.
So on the gender comparison for ELA, that's a pretty significant drop. I know we've spoken about the third graders. I'm just talking about the girls right now. Do we think there's something else going on there? Like I'm used to seeing, the girls kind of beat the boys pretty handily in ELA, and then the boys sort of win by a hair in math. But that's, a 12-point drop is that's roughly double the size of the boys' drop. And I'm just, can we
Right,
hypothesize
and I think what's
on?
important to remember is overall, only 78.8% of our third graders met or achieved that goal.
Right.
So it's something that we're continuing to closely monitor, and we're continuing to look at it school by school to try to dive more deeply into it, and to assure the next steps for fourth grade. So, I think that there is a high percentage of kids in that grade level that were identified for special ed. So we're working through all of that and the services. They're now at a point where they're receiving the Literacy Academy. So they had 1 full year of it. Now they're into year 2 of it. So that's helping close that gap for that group of kids as well. Like I said, it's a group that we are closely monitoring. We're on top of. We had great conversations during the summer when we got the results back. We get the preliminary results in June. So we really were able to dive in and say, is it just one particular grade level, one particular class? What is it that happened? And so it's amazing when you talk with the building principals and you then talk with the reading specialists, they can talk about every single child. That it's like they just know every single detail and all the past and the history of that child. It's really amazing how much they know their students and where they are and what they need to do in order to progress. So we've put as many resources as we can into our fourth grade to really help coach teachers and really help instruct the students.
I had two. Penny, you have a question? Go ahead.
I was just wondering, on the next generation science standard, there are 3 schools, Ridgefield, Weston, and Wilton, that had data suppressed to ensure confidentiality, but still reported scores. What data are they suppressing, and how do we even know then how to compare what they're reporting to New Canaan?
So the grade level that was suppressed was Reading. So that data was suppressed in the next generation science standards.
In 8th grade?
In 8th grade. And it's truly just because there wasn't a large enough cohort of kids for them to report out on. And so it might give away personal identifying information. So every so often, you'll see that happen with some of those small districts like Easton and Reading, that the data's just been suppressed
But
for that particular grade level.
Ridgefield has the star and report it. So I'm just curious.
Oh, that must be, I'm sorry, that's a typographical error, Penny.
Oh, okay.
I apologize.
No, then mystery solved. Thank you.
Mystery solved. I'm so sorry. That should have not been there.
So I also just wanted to say, I'm always impressed with the level to which you all know your students and how they're doing and what the cohorts are and how they're progressing from grade to grade. And I know you look at it by teacher, by school, by males, by females, and slice and dice it. And I think that's one of the reasons we do so well, that I'm getting used to it, doing that well on these tests. But I just wanted to thank you, because it's that attention to detail and knowing those kids that makes such a difference. It's not saying that we can't do better and strive to do better, but I just want to commend you all for that incredible effort to make every single child reach their fullest potential.
I had 2 questions. Is 3 through 8 all electronic? They're taking all these tests on computer, or is some of it paper-based?
Everything's electronic.
It is,
So
okay,
they
from the
do
start.
the next generation science assessment, as well as the ELA and the Smarter Balanced all electronically. They are given scratch paper, they are given paper and pencil that they can utilize. Some of the children will sometimes draft down some notes on a piece of paper before they go to type in. Others go right into the computer and type, and then they're looking at it and editing it. Everything is on the computer. And so that has really been the assessment since we started the Smarter Balanced Assessment. It's always been on the computer electronically.
Okay. And then I
And
just.
that's why the NWA is nice, because it's also electronic. It's
Okay,
also
so
on
it's
the
a good
computer.
preparation, yeah. Okay. Just a question on social studies, you mentioned it at the end, and I wanted to highlight it, because it's, what's interesting is when you think about, you know, when I look at the ELA, the areas we measure, and just some working knowledge of the social studies curriculum and the emphasis on writing development, what do you see from the curriculum standpoint? Is there a lot of overlap, and does some of the preparation for the Smarter Balance come out of the social studies? Like where's the crosswalk, to use your term, between the two, and how does one help the other?
So, and Mary, you're welcome to answer this, because I know that you do a lot of work with your department, so if you want to piggyback on what I say, but I know that certainly the social studies teachers take a lot of ownership for the results in ELA, and they do spend a lot of time looking at the data, because you're correct, they do hold a lot of that informational text that they're doing on a day-to-day basis with our students. So we often have conversations, Sarah and Mary together, about what terms you're using, because what term you use in social studies might be just slightly different than what you use in English. So it's trying to make sure that those terms are consistent, so that they learn, if they've learned how to do a particular skill in social studies, that they also apply it over in English. So there is a lot of work that goes on with argument writing, with our inquiry, that lives in both of the departments. And they do rely heavily on one another for our students to achieve.
Would you say that also the standards for social studies, because we refer to a lot to the standards in ELA, then does the test, I'm just curious if the test's designed to even test those against those standards in the ELA world, given that there's no assessment really per se for social studies?
So it's sort of embedded inside the ELA standards. And so we'll deal with argumentation. You heard Jill talk about claims and targets. We'll look particularly at the data that is around research and writing, which it might look different when you're in a disciplinary. Science has their different disciplines. We've got history, geography, civics. So depending on what discipline you're sort of in, it looks different, but it's still argumentation. We're still looking at sources and annotating and trying to figure out bias and who wrote this and why and dates and all of that. But it definitely dovetails very nicely with ELA. So they're not ELA standards, they're in social studies, but if you can do them in social studies, you can certainly apply that and work hard to trying to transfer that and apply that as well.
Well, the ELA standards, there's a set of 5 standards within ELA. So inside reading are reading for literature standards and reading for information standards. So the students receive passages on the SBAC that are either literary or informational, both most of the time. So the standards, the teaching that we do, both in social studies and in language arts, specific to those, and it's true in science too, really, related to the reading for information standards, are going to kind of live everywhere. It's going to live with each one of those disciplines, because every time they say information text, they're going to be applying that within those areas. And then the same would be true for writing. So the writing is broken up into 3 different areas. It's writing for information, writing narrative, and then writing argument. So when the children are writing information, or when they're writing, specifically information and argument, that also is living across the disciplines, whereas narrative tends to live a little bit more in the ELA classes. But in language arts, our curriculum does cover all of those areas. There's just a lot more application in the science and social studies.
Makes sense. Thank you for that. Other questions? I would just, Penny said it well, but I just want to thank all of you. I know it's been, it's always hard work, particularly these last few years, as the kids are coming out, and these formative years are so important, and we just appreciate the level of attention and individualized focus you have with all of our students. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Good night.
Jill makes it seem so easy.
Yeah. All right, so now we'll transition to our next agenda item, which is our statement of accounts with Mr. O'Keefe.
Okay, I'll let everybody leave the room first.
Sure,
Yeah,
take another
on cue.
breather.
On cue.
I'm used to it. Yeah. Okay, so this is our first report of the year, September. Typically, we don't report July and August. None of the encumbrances, or many of the encumbrances are not yet done. So this is the first month where we have good data that has encumbrances for the year. So as of the end of September, our year-to-date September actual was $17.8 million, or 17.3% of our full-year budget of $103 million. The only thing remarkable to say about it is when we compare our attainment of 17.3% of budget, compare it to last year at this time, when we were at 14.9%. We looked at the attainment schedule on page 2, and we immediately saw that what was sticking out like a sore thumb was purchase services. And when we drilled down, we found that in transportation, we have a semi-annual billing of about $2.2 million each, one in September, one in February. And last year, DATCO billed us late. They didn't bill us until October. So as a result, it's artificially showing that have a higher attainment of about 2.5 points compared to last year. But in reality, it's a timing difference, and it'll normalize by next month. Other than that, we're, on a normalized basis, we're right on track. So, any questions?
Great. Questions? Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done. Okay, we have 2 action items tonight. The first is the 2024 Board of Education meeting calendar, which you have before you. This is our second reading. Are there any additional comments, questions?
Haven't heard any? Good.
Okay, so I will then move to approve for second reading the Board of Ed calendar of meetings for 2024. All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. And then we have an update presentation from Sarah Schubert, who is chair of the fundraising committee for the Dome, with some new information or an update on the exterior of the Dome.
Again. Well, I'm extremely excited to be here at this point in time in our planning for the Dome and to finalize this. I'm hoping tonight will be meet your approval on what we envision for it. So I'm going to ask you to bear with me. I'm going to do this very quickly, but just a little run through to remind everybody where we've come from and anybody that is coming up to speed listening. So our BSTAR subcommittee has worked incredibly hard over the past year to create a lasting legacy with the New Canaan High School. And we have a shared vision of what the donor wall might look like. I'm so grateful to the small core group of the committee that has stuck with me through this final phase. So Kara Gillum is helping out, Lydia Kramer, and Lauren Nussbaum, who's here too, in the crickets crowd now. So we've worked closely with the Greater Committee, with Alan Sneath, with Zach Whitlock, consulted with the art department here at the high school, the administration, researched materials, received samples, collaborated on ideas, visions, costs, timing, and realities. We all share the same vision, more of an entrance to the area than an aesthetically pleasing visual art display rather than a traditional donor wall listing names. We want this to be a space that anyone can walk by and see, be a part of, feel, just that they want to find out more about this space, what's inside. So, on to the rendering, which I believe you all have a copy of, and there were some out here, I know. But we consulted with the group and working with the group W&E Bomb, and they've created 2 visuals. The first is what we're recommending and hoping will be approved tonight. Basically, they will create 2 templates, one for the overlay of the logos. The wall will be prepared in advance, and the paint will be on. And then a template will come with the logo overlay, and a second template will be there for the placement of the stars. We will install on-site, And basically, the one piece that I think was on this one is we wanted to add a touch of history, something that explains the space and when the planetarium was originally created and the history of leading into the dome and what it's about for anyone coming to visit. So putting a little sort of commemorative plaque on the left of the entrance. So as you'll recall, during our campaign, we offered the opportunity to make a donation at varying levels, and our committee is extremely proud to have every single donor, no matter what level they gave, will be represented by a star, whether it's digital or physical. The second rendering that you'll see in front of you is basically, we worked with this company to say, if in the future we needed more funds, the district needs more funds, you decide you need more funds to add to the dome, whether it be in programming or in other ways, there would be space on the exterior walls to have more stars created. So that would be, it's done, the design's done, it's just a matter of having it be made. Ultimately, after many, many iterations and discussions, we all keep coming back to basically a collaborative and united vision. One that will be welcoming to all, inclusive, and inviting. And I hope you'll all agree that this feels fitting, modern, and classically simple, and befitting of the dome and what it will be.
Excellent. Thank you for that update. Anyone have questions? Comments? While everyone's thinking, I just want to thank you especially again for all of your hard work. I mean, on top of fundraising everything, then this was just another project, Part B, which you didn't probably know you were signing up for. But we just all very much appreciate your continued efforts and just the back and forth and organizing everyone and just the creative part of this and the grand finale on what's been a really successful campaign. So thank you, and to you and to the entire team.
It's definitely a team effort, and like I said, there's core people still sticking in there answering my calls in the summer. So,
Well, and just as a very, very quick timing update, the seats have traversed the Atlantic and are, I think, next door in Stamford. They'll be moved into the dome later this week. We intend to begin our installation next week, and that's the final piece. We've been painting, we've been doing other work around to finalize some things. So optimistically, week and a half, 2 weeks on that, which is why we wanted to bring this forward to you right away, so that with your approval, we can continue this work going, so that the vision, of course, is for it all to be completed at the same time. But I've got to tell you, if the seats are in and the projectors are working and this is not quite done, we're still using the space. But
I'd like to be able to plan to invite all the donors in to see the space. And if
Absolutely.
the wall's not done, we can have a rendering of it on the blow up a poster for everyone. But
Yep,
it would-
but we do have the work queued up for the prep up there, because there's a trophy case there that will go, and the wall prep that'll take to do all of that. And then the final piece
Yes.
will be the installation.
Okay, Brendan?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, for all your great work in pushing this forward. I know it was took a lot, so appreciate it. My question is, are we recognizing the town of New Canaan and their donation, obviously the biggest one? On the
Yes,
wall?
so what is not in the file would be the commemorative plaque that's a very much of a draft. It's still a work in progress, but the idea is there, the look and the coloring was what I think you needed to approve. There'll be a second one inside, possibly smaller, about that size, and have the same look and visual, and the wording, again, we're working on finalizing that, but the town of New Canaan will be listed first, largest, with huge thanks to the public component, and then anyone over a certain level would be listed under them.
Yep.
And on the outside wall, there's varying sizes, as you can see, and in the tiny, tiny print, if you have your magnifying glass out, it tells you exactly how many stars at different sizes will be listed with the names. There's about 43 named stars outside the wall, and the 4-inch stars that are outside the wall will represent every single donor on a certain level, but everyone will be in a digital inside or on the wall itself. So whether they gave $25 or more than that, so.
All right. With that, I'll ask for a motion to approve the donor recognition wall for the new dome. Brendan, second. Julie, all in favor? That's unanimous. Well done, thank you. All right, comments from the public? Seeing none, move on to announcements and future business.
Sure thing. As is our tradition, first meeting in November, we will be sharing the enrollment projections update. We just received them in draft in the last 48 hours or so. So we're going to go through all of that, and Ms. Bianco will be sharing with us our staff utilization reports and our enrollment, and always a highlight of the year. So looking forward to that. We also anticipate having the All Sports Booster Club coming to join us to discuss a donation that they've been pursuing over the last 18 months, even a couple of years, something that they have a meeting scheduled with P&Z between now and then, so they'll be talking with P&Z about this. It's the corner of Farm and South, and some digital signage there instead of the fence that we've had. And of course, we have a couple of board members who are not running in our election, so we just will take a moment to say thank you to them.
Great, thank you. All right, I think, ask for a motion to adjourn. Hugo, second. Penny, all in favor? All right, good night, everyone. Thank you.